you for joining us for Woke Moments, a conversation on issues and hot topics impacting young generations. My name is Janet Kelly, and I am the Executive Director of Sanctuary of Hope, as well as your host. So now let's jump into a moment of awakening.
Woke Moments!
We're joining you live for our first live podcast on youth and young adults during this COVID-19 period season. And I am so grateful that you are able to join us for this discussion. My name is Janet Kelly, and I'm the Executive Director of Sanctuary of Hope. And I'm very happy to have some of our Sanctuary of Hope team members who are able to share about COVID-19 and what COVID or how COVID is impacting our youth and young adults, and how our youth and young adults are finding or tapping into their resiliency in order to thrive. And so that's what our focus is going to be on today for our discussion. And so I would like to introduce to you Gail White-Biggers, who is a licensed marriage family therapist, as well as Jeremy Gibson, who is our permanent supportive housing intensive case manager. And so before we kind of get off into this discussion, I think it's very important to set the tone about why we're talking about youth coping and building the necessary protective factors in order for them to thrive. One of the things that we haven't seen in the news is how young people have had their lives utterly disrupted by COVID. And that disruption has included loss. It has included a range of emotions that may include grief. It's included a lot of uncertainty around what's happening or what's going to happen, not only today, but what is going to happen tomorrow. And so it's very important to have these discussions around what this disruption has meant to them, to put it in the context of young people who are especially at a period of life where they're having the fastest kind of developmental growth. And as they're going through this developmental growth and transitioning into adulthood, life looks quite different, especially for us mature folks who have had a lot of life experiences and have the ability to kind of navigate, deal with our emotions, and have the ability to kind of regulate what happens as things are thrown our way. And when we talk about resiliency in young people, it's helping young people to deal with life circumstances as life throws punches their way. And as life throws those punches, right, that young people are able to look at those punches that are being thrown and turn those punches into something, a learning opportunity, a life skills opportunity, a life enhancement opportunity for them, because it's a part of their own personal development and growth. And so that's why today we have with us our guests, because one, they are on the front lines of dealing with youth who are coming in for services, whether those services are basic needs, rental assistance, general counseling, therapy services, education support. They could share with you from a different perspective as a boots on the ground what's happening and how we can foster better resiliency among our youth during this COVID-19 period. So before I start kind of with that, let's start with you, Jeremy, and let's talk about some of the things that you're seeing among our youth and young adult population right now. What are some of the challenges and opportunities that are out there with our young people as they are experiencing this COVID period?
Well, I mean, from what I see, a lot of the participants are worried about everything that's going on. But I've been using it as a way to help them, gain some more self-sufficient skills. Use this as a time to start trying to figure out some things that you enjoy doing that you possibly wouldn't have time to do while we're on this quarantine. Start researching and start trying to pick up some new skills so that way when things do open up, because eventually things are going to open back up. And you want to be prepared and you want to be ready for when things do open up. And there could be some more new opportunities available. So for a lot of my participants, I've been keeping the ball rolling. We can't let this thing just stop everything that we have going on. Currently, I have a participant right now that's at a job interview. For all the youth that's out here listening, jobs are hiring. And for a lot of people that are on the quarantine, that means that a lot of positions are open. So with that being said, youth, keep applying for jobs, keep looking. Don't let this stop you from going on, doing what you have to do. But for my participants, just keep them afloat, keep them knowing that things are going to get better. And like I said, a lot of the participants are taking this time to figure out some new things, some new crafts, trying to figure out who they are and take this time to really utilize it. So that way, when things do open back up again, you'll be better prepared.
Right. And so, and with that in mind, because, one of the challenges that has been out there, especially yesterday I read this economic development report put out by the Los Angeles County Roundtable. And basically what the report said is that this COVID crisis is going to hit the youth and young adult population the hardest because one, it's going to be difficult for many of them to enter back into the employment market right away. And that they're going to be, not only that, they're going to be competing with a larger population of individuals who are seeking those employment opportunities as well. And so with that in mind, and knowing that as media and other outlets are putting out information about how difficult or how difficult the future is going to be, what are some tools and strategies we should be thinking about in terms of how do we communicate with our young people in order to keep their resiliency up? Would you mind sharing on that, Gil?
Absolutely. So first of all, Ms. Kelly, this is just a wonderful opportunity to share with our Facebook family and our community, and just working with Jeremy and working at Sanctuary Hope has just been a real dream come true to work with this population. So yes, what Jeremy shared is absolutely, we are on the same page. We work together. We are partnered with all the different programs through Sanctuary of Hope, but we are definitely keeping the ball rolling. And so when we think about youth resilience and what you said earlier, I thought about this automatic switch that our participants have. Many of them have this automatic switch that just kind of turns on that says, despite these horrifying conditions, despite the uncertainties, I can still positively adapt. And so with that being in mind, we focus on that. We focus on that as case managers. We focus on that as life coaches. We focus on that as housing navigators, as me being their clinician. I think that's the goal, is to always keep that resilient piece in mind. And so with that being said, and preparing for the future, one strategy is always focusing on their strengths. Now, as a mental health clinician, I'm always using evidence-based approaches, but like CBT or DBT, and the list goes on. But at the same time, during this crisis, I'm also focusing on their strengths. I'm also focusing on their ability to be creative, right? To find out what's happening inside of them right now. A question I've been asking with our participants, I've been asking them over and over again, what's emerging right now? What's emerging inside of you during this quarantine? What's happening in here? What's happening in here? What's happening relationally? And we're building upon that in preparation for going back into the workplace. So if that's decreasing symptoms, if that's focusing on their strengths, if that's nurturing their creativity, if that's self-care, I can go on and on with that. But that's what we're doing. We're making sure that they're still able to manage, that they're nurturing that resilience, are learning it in preparation for re-engagement.
So, I mean, one of the things, I mean, because we work with a variety of populations, we work with those who are housed, those who are unhoused, those who are in the midst of housing instability, and then those who are housed but have maybe not so great households. What would you say have been some of the challenges related to COVID and those young people as far as their balance of mental wellness?
Well, you
So
want to go
you're,
ahead, Gail?
I'm sorry.
So you want to go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Gail? You got it?
Oh, sure. Okay, so you're asking Miss Kelly, what would I say to our participants, our youth, who are trying to navigate through COVID-19 and their family background is still a bit, I don't know, detached? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. I'm going to break it up in different parts because I think it'll
Okay.
be easier. So we have young people who come in for services that are housed, right? And so the delivery of services or the connections that you make to address their mental well-being is different than those who are unhoused, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, you know what it does. At times it does feel different. My approach is always the same, but there is a different kind of a conversation compared to clients who may be right now couch surfing. It's different, right? So my level of just as their clinician right now and practicing this social distancing, the way I am even making myself available, I'm always available, but increasing that contact is important. Making sure that they are still engaged with supportive systems and finding compensation for those family members and that support that they might not be getting sleeping at a friend's house, right? Those who are housed, it is a little different. Sometimes they might be housed, but they still feel this sense of loneliness, depression. So I'm always thinking about the factors that brought them into therapy in the first place. They're still present. Either they're housed or not housed. If they're living in their car, something brought them to treatment. So we're still working on that, but at the same time, I am definitely focusing on that social interaction, that social connectedness, because we know without it, it's related to a lot of suicidal thoughts and depression, housed or unhoused.
Right, right. So Jeremy, you do a lot of the kind of in-house kind of case management, working with the young people who are in permanent supportive housing. So what does that look like in your kind of like in your daily work of engaging and addressing youth concerns related to COVID-19?
Well, just to piggyback on what Gail said, the communication is key. The fact that the participants feel like they can still communicate with me as if there isn't a COVID-19 issue going on is very important to them. I know one thing that's hard is with the social distancing is that they can't really enjoy their social life as much as they were.
I think we all do.
Yes.
Yeah, but really for the participants, that are just getting into housing, they were kind of in a lifestyle where it was very transient, where they had a lot of friends that were also experiencing the same issues with housing as for them. So now that they have housing and they want to be able to invite people over and stuff, now they can't do that. But again, even with that, I just tell them, make sure you're checking in on everybody, check in on your loved ones, check in on your friends. Again, I've had some very in-depth conversations because of COVID-19, because I haven't been able to do a lot of in-face meetings. I've been having a lot of phone calls that span 2 to 3 hours, and we're just speaking and getting some things off of our chest, just venting. And I really feel like this is a very beneficial time for a lot of us to just sit back and get to know ourselves a little better and work on ourselves internally. So that way, again, once things do get back to normal, because they will, we'll be able to add some more depth and add some more quality to who we are since we experienced this, unfortunate time.
Jeremy, I think you mentioned something that's very important when you just said that you're on the phone for 2 or 3 hours. So I don't think most people understand under the social context of COVID how being a sounding board. Just simply being a sounding board is beneficial to youth and young adults. So I don't know if you can expand on that a little bit more, either you, Jeremy, or Gail.
Sure, I can add to that too, Jeremy. I know you have a lot more to share too. Jeremy is awesome in what he does. Oh my gosh, he's just awesome. But this is interesting for me too, because you know, telehealth is something that I've always used in the past to check in on clients, to stabilize clients, to initiate, welfare checks, right, or crisis calls. But now, over the past few weeks, telehealth has been what we do as a practice, right?
Right.
And so I'm even listening differently. I thought I was great at active listening. That's an intervention. But now I'm listening different. As Jeremy said, I am blown away by their comfortability, this age group, of being on the phone and talking. And even now, hearing their conversations are different. I mean, they even say things like, Miss Gail, how are you doing? They're so comfortable in their setting, right? They've become more vulnerable. So being able to, really work with that vulnerability right now, they're in their space where they're comfortable, so they're really sharing a whole lot. Yeah. So it's good.
So we a lot of times we don't look at, when we're addressing youth and their kind of mental well-being, their health well-being, or just well-being in general, we never look at it from a positive strength building aspect of it, because we always focus in on, okay, what's the deficit in this, and then build from there. Whereas, I think one of the greatest benefits for Sanctuary of Hope and how we've kind of focused and geared ourselves is, how do we focus on the resiliency within our young people, and how do we ensure that we tap into that, and also how do we build upon it in order for them to get to a point of long-term stability. And so what are some protective factors? What are some of the protective factors that we're working with some of our youth on during this whole COVID period to address their overall well-being?
Yeah, Ms. Kelly, you literally took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, I use the things that they've experienced as ways to tell them, like, hey, this is strength. And you've been through, a multitude of things. So this is just another walk in the park, to be honest. And I'm very optimistic. I'm one of the most optimistic people that my participants know. And I just, I use it as a way, again, to let them know, like, hey, you have the strength in you, but also let them know that it's okay to be vulnerable at times.
Right.
We don't have to always be strong. That gets tiring when you have to always want to maintain this strength. It's like when you're working out and you're constantly working out and you don't give your body time to rest, your muscles start breaking down. So I like to also reiterate to the participants and the youth out there, it's okay to have your moments of vulnerability. It's okay to have that moment of weakness. So that way, when you get through that moment, go ahead and have that time of weakness and then go back to the task at hand and get back onto the strength.
How much of that do you think is culturally? Because, oftentimes we're told, you got to be strong, you got to tough it out, you got to get through that. How much do you think of that is cultural? I'm just curious.
Well, a lot of it's cultural. But just as a country, we have many of times in history where we exuded strength.
Right.
But I think it gets oversighted that we have to always be strong. And sometimes everybody doesn't have the ability to be strong all the time. And we don't embrace the vulnerable part or the weak side of us. And it allows for an unbalance to happen. So when you're constantly trying to maintain the strength, and when you have a breakdown, you have a major breakdown. So kind of try and balance it out. I know culturally, me speaking for the Black experience that I've experienced, strength was everything.
Right.
And just in the male culture of the Black experience that I've experienced, strength is everything. And as a Black man, it's hard for us to show vulnerability or weakness at times.
So Gail, can you continue on with some of the protective factors that we're working on with some of our youth and young adults to help them focus on and build their resiliency during this COVID period?
Absolutely. So, what I have learned working with our participants too, or any client, is the more you nurture the youth strengths, I know, like when I'm sitting in the room with clients, I am a story keeper. That's what I do. I sit there from day one and I am building a story. They don't know it, but I'm listening from their infancy, what they remember about learning how to walk, to what brought them into treatment, where they see this stuff going in the future. It's a story. So I'm always listening for exceptions. I'm always listening for how they were able to, engage in life, being in the foster system, or, developing an illness or whatever it is. I'm always listening for those moments where they bounce back. So the more you nurture those strengths and you validate those stories and you validate those exceptions, you start to see this direct effect on their self-worth. And sometimes it's not immediate, but I see it. I can see that they're enrolling into school. Now they're catching a bus more when they were more isolated. Now they're making every session, right? So you start to see it. They don't see it immediately, but I know that self-worth is a protective factor, Miss Kelly. That social involvement is, that social support. Those are protective factors. Like Jeremy said earlier, yes, it is very cultural, right? There are times that I have to also, being an African American woman, say, wait a minute, Gail, call on your girlfriends, right? You don't have to do this by yourself. And so I think, like with Sanctuary of Hope, what I love is this team-based approach, because I know that I'm a counselor. I know what I do. I can do this. But when I hear them bring up other names, right? And I use those relationships to reinforce that you don't have to do this alone, right? So I would say, what would Jeremy say? What would my son say? What would Tiana say? I bring in these names on purpose so that they know, hey, I got a village, right? And my village looks like me. So it's awesome.
Right. And I think this whole notion of togetherness, this unity around COVID becomes very important, because as young people have stronger support systems, right, we're helping them to develop or build on their fortitude to get through this. And even within our support systems, how do we create these positive futuristic outlooks so that youth can see, yes, this is a period of time, I'm gonna go through something, but during this process, there is some building I could do, which is the meantime, in order to get to the end, which is the joy. And I just use the word joy because I think it's important for us to, when we talk about young people, COVID, just in general, how do we teach and get folks to see and feel joy as a part of well-being, as a part of balancing your mental wellness? Because even with coping means you have to have all these tools in order to get to your end product. And I know for me, my end product oftentimes is, what's my joy? What's my happiness? What's my satisfaction? And so can you share like some of the activities that you think are very helpful for youth and young adults to help them with coping and getting to like the end product, the positive outlook on their future?
Well, I know for me and my participants, they don't have a positive outlook because they've been through so much. So, and it's hard for them to really express the things that they really like and that they really enjoy, because they feel like a lot of the things have been taken away from them. So I'm at stages with my participants where we're just now trying to figure out what are some things that you really enjoy doing. So some of the activities that I like to do is getting them to just close their eyes and take themselves back to any time and any happy place where they've been or where they've experienced that moment. And how can they expand upon that feeling, so whereas we can find more things that's going to give you that same type of feeling. So kind of not detailing what that moment was, but the outer layer of it. How did it come to that? How did you get to that point? What were the makeups of it? What were the people that were around you? Start trying to figure out those things. And I also try and utilize that in a way where I can translate that into today, into reality and what's going on and how we can build upon that. But it's very difficult. One of the most difficult questions that I ask participants is, what do you enjoy doing? And it's so hard for them to really explain what they really enjoy doing.
Wow. Wow. And so how do we get them to that point, Gail? From a clinical point of view.
I laid it right over the plate for you, Gail. Right over the plate. Knock it out the park.
For you.
I know, right? I love it. I love the setup. I love it. So, you know what Jeremy says, you know, it's very individual, you know, it's very individual. And it does sometimes goes back to that hardwired resiliency. You know, sometimes we're teaching our participants to be resilient. How does that look? You know, and it's that groundwork of building upon those strengths, like we said earlier, over and over again. And there are some who just have this quick bounce back, right?
Right.
I've been through worse, you know, and this ain't nothing, you know, this is just, you know, a flu, right? I mean, it's like, so you'll have these different experiences, but I think the important thing is teaching for participants or youth that find themselves that cannot find joy. What Jeremy did is, what he does is great, you know, that mindfulness, that teaching them to be in the absolute moment, it's work. And I actually spend sessions just being mindful. You know, what does that Tootsie Roll taste like? Right? Describe those flavors. What does this Jolly Rancher taste like? Right? What do your pants feel like? What does your hair feel like? What is your texture? So trying to get them connected to themselves in the moment. And sometimes it takes that from the ground up. I want you to feel your own self first before you can connect to feeling others, you know? But it could be something like that, or something as practical as Jeremy said, there is this intervention that I do use that I love to use it. I give a story and I ask them questions, and I will allow them to answer the question in their ideal way, right? So it can start from your ideal day to how you're getting to work. Are you on the bus? Are you getting chauffeured? Right? I mean, I let them go for it. And let me tell you, most of the time they are shocked by what comes out of them. They didn't know they wanted to live on a farm. They didn't know they wanted to be near animals. They didn't know they wanted to be an executive, right? They didn't know they wanted to live by the beach. And they're like, this is the first time I've ever shared that. I didn't know it was there. So that's the long answer. But it works, and you find it for the individual.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I just do a lot of digging. I ask a lot of questions to get the most out of them, just so they can start realizing some things about themselves. You know, it's one thing to internalize it, but it's another thing to voice it and hear it for yourself and then receive feedback. It's very important.
Absolutely.
So Jeremy, and I do want to say to the audience that's watching us on Facebook, you're more than welcome to ask any questions. Just be sure to post those questions in the Facebook live chat, and then we'll pull those questions and then we'll pose them to Gil and Jeremy. And so, Jeremy, one of the great things that I think all of us here at Sanctuary Hope appreciate about you is that you are like our go-to person as it relates to housing and working with landlords and helping our youth and young adults navigate and find those housing opportunities, because we know that housing is the great stabilizer at the end of the day. Because if you don't have housing, it's going to be hard to find employment. It's going to be hard to deal with your mental wellness or mental well-being. It's just going to be pretty hard to go forward in a lot of your personal development. It doesn't mean that you won't go forward. It's just that the barriers are just a little bit harder for you to kind of get over that hurdle. So what would you say because you work with a lot of the young people in which you're helping them kind of move into or get into permanent housing, what has been kind of like some of the things that you helped young people to learn in order to navigate in this COVID period into getting into housing?
Well, I know for me, my drive for, this position and just finding them housing is over the roof, honestly. Um, I have the fortunate experience of, apartment searching for myself and filling out applications and having opportunities to interview for apartments with landlords. So I have the experience there, right? And then for the participants, I go ahead and I empathize with them because I put myself in their shoes. What would it look like for me if I was in this situation? Now, as far as navigating, housing is still there. And to be honest, this is a good time to get into housing right now. There are a lot of units that's open. People that had units on the market now are seeing less and less people come in and check out the units because of the situations that's going on, but that doesn't mean that they aren't renting. Like I have a participant now that just had his voucher filled out and we'll be dropping this packet off and he'll be moving into permanent housing shortly. And one of the things that I've been working with him to prepare him is to just come up with a list of everything you feel like you need in your unit. Remember the things you had in your unit when you were living with your family or when you were going through when you were in permanent housing at a time in your life. Just being prepared and preparing them mentally, because it's more the preparation than anything. We have participants that are in transitional housing, emergency shelters. So they're so used to being around other people 24 hours a day. They're used to having assistants, on-site case managers, on-site therapists. All that changes once you go into permanent housing on your own. And I just try and mentally prepare them for that, because the first 6 months, according to my ICMS training, is the toughest time for participants when they're moving into the new unit. There's a lot of things that goes on in that first 6 months. There's loneliness, some depression can slip in due to the fact that you don't have the resources available to you. You become fearful because now you go from a place where you didn't have responsibilities of bills and making sure you had food and things like that to completely it being switched, and now it's all on you and you're on your own. But the great thing about our organization and what we do is that we continue on to follow them through this path. You, Ms. Kelly, as a leader, have created this standard of self-sufficiency. And that's what I thrive on, as far as getting them to the point where they can say, hey, I can do this. I can pay my bills. I can fill out this money order to pay my rent, because I have a team like Jeremy and the Sanctuary of Hope team to help me if I ever had any questions or assistance. So it's really just being available, still communicating with them, still letting them know that you're there with them every step of the way.
Do you want to add to that, Gail?
No, I think he covered it all.
I tried to roll another one for you, Gail. You can't keep doing that.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I think what you hit is very important, but I want to kind of talk about families, because even, some of the work that we do right now is trying to connect a lot of our young people or reunite them with their families, especially those who may have not left on the best of conditions. Some may have been related to behavior, some may have been related to something else, some may have been related to just past histories of undiagnosed mental issues. And so during this COVID period, I know that we recently have reunited 3 young people with their families, reconnected them back. But what would you say are some of the challenges right now associated with youth who are disconnected from their families and a need for them to reunite, or even if reuniting is a good idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we think about like COVID-19, and it feeling very systemic, you know. I'm pretty sure this pandemic is going to go down in history as a collective trauma, right?
Yes.
So we are all experiencing this together. So with our population, we understand that they probably, many of them already feel this sense of alienation from the larger society already. And then you
Right.
have that coupled with, you know, an estrangement from family members. So it
Mhm.
goes back to that social isolation. So that collective trauma now, it complicates, you know, the social
Right.
distancing or the physical distancing, right?
Right.
So we're looking at all of those factors. And it goes back to trying to find some compensation for what has been lost in all of this.
Mhm.
So right now, grief is returning, right? There's this
Mhm.
this loss of relationships again, this loss of coworkers, there's loss of friends at the gym, you know.
Right.
There's so many things that come up right now during this time. And so when it
Right.
comes to the family component, really trying to assess if there are safe, healthy, familiar relationships that they can return to, you
Mhm.
know, or even start the process of reconnecting. Who was safe for you? Who do you remember giving you the most joy? Even if it
Mm.
was when you were 7 years old,
Mhm.
with my auntie. Okay, where's auntie? Right? So
Mhm.
how can we connect with auntie? So just at their pace, helping them reconnect with safe people that they once trusted or they're ready to now trust again, or finding that person. I kind of want to connect with my supervisor. I kind of want to connect with the neighbor, but I'm kind of afraid, you know, and working with that too, because sometimes we have to build family that's not
Right.
family, flesh and blood.
Right. Right. And I think when we often talk about family, and that's one of the things that we talk about, even in through our family reunification, our family uh, family connect program, is that family is whoever you identify with. It doesn't have to be a blood relative, because
Right.
we've had people who reunified with a neighbor, or we've had people who reunified with a friend of a mother, or even had folks reunified with the former foster parent. So it's how do you identify those families and family relationships? So what would you suggest as far as tools for families or those who are reached out to as being a family member during this COVID period, especially when young people, like I said, are often looking for a sounding board, or they're looking for some type of emotional connection to someone. So what kind of tools do you think those individuals who are on the opposite end of
Mm,
the youth, right,
mhm.
should be kind of taking note of when young people are engaging with them during this COVID period?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I'm gonna go back to something my mama taught me, right? And I think this advice was so great. As a little girl, my mother always told me, Gail,
Mhm.
I bet not hear you asking people, you know, if there's a need, you know, call me. So
Yep.
my mother always taught me, Gail, you show up. You show up. You know
Mhm.
there's a need, you show up. If someone is hungry, you don't ask, are you hungry? You make a plate of spaghetti and you
Right.
take it over there to them. So everyone, I know they don't think like that. It is about, if you need me, call me. And sometimes we fall into that. And that's no judgment on anyone, right? Because I know that that's sincerity too, to make yourself
Right.
available. But to those on the other end, practice being intentional about how you
Mhm.
show up for people, right? You can just be observant of that young person on the bus, that young person, you know, that neighbor, you know,
Mhm.
there's a need, right?
Right.
Just offer some part of yourself that you feel safe to give. So if that is some cookies that you made, pack them
Mhm.
up and say, I thought about you too, right? If there is a $20, and I remember, if I can use something, some church language, right? They used to call it holy handshakes back in the day. So you want to slap $20 in your hand. It's a handshake. Nobody needs to see it, right? I mean, whatever you can do
Mhm.
to build this awareness that they're not invisible, that you
Right.
see them. I don't know how to be there for you, but in the relationship, allow me the time to learn.
Great. That's fantastic. Do we have any questions? Okay. So I'm trying to open it up for anyone who may have any questions. Facebook Live for Gail and or Jeremy. So feel free to do that because our goal is to wrap up for sure by 12 p.m. So one of the things that I want to go back to is the culture, right? Because even as during this COVID period, we are hearing that one, for sure, African Americans are contracting COVID at a high rate. Mm. And then for us, as we're working with young people, which more than almost 90% of the young people who come through our doors here in South LA and in the South Bay are Black youth. What are some of the things as far as on the front lines are we working on to ensure that our young people are keeping themselves safe from COVID, to that they understand exactly what COVID is? Because, you know, when we talk about social media and we talk about the news, there's so many different points of view and information that's out there. For example, like last week, I literally spent 2 hours talking with one of our youth, and we were talking about conspiracy theories and how, you know, they're not going to put it here, and then it's already on the west side of town, and it's not here really in South LA, but then it's not really in the South Bay until you show them, hey, there's cases in Inglewood, there's cases in Hawthorne, there's cases in Lawndale. So how do we kind of frame the conversation so that they know that they need to protect themselves and be safe?
Well, I know for me, all of my participants are on social media, and they're seeing all of the misinformation that's being put out there. One of the things I like to express to them is regardless of if it's a conspiracy or not, it's here and it's real. Mm-hmm. So one thing I've been just encouraging is to pay some attention to your health. Reconnecting with your health insurance, figuring out who your primary care provider is. If you don't have one, let's link you to one. Let's start being more health aware, start doing research on this virus, start figuring out, you know, what part of the nervous system it's attacking. So that way you'll be informed yourself as opposed to just reading a post somewhere without not doing your own research. So I encourage all of you, and including our participants, do your own research. Don't just listen to somebody else's message. Do your own research, figure it out, and come to your own conclusion about it. But regardless of how it got here, it's here and it's real, and we need to be very aware of it and be very health conscious.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think are some ways that as practitioners, as well as those who are non-practitioners, can help with helping youth balance kind of like all of this content? Because youth really thrive on the content. I don't even want to say thrive, but they get a lot of energy from the content that they receive on social media. You know, you can tell them, hey, you don't need to be in and out. I mean, you have to be mindful that, one, you could be a carrier and you don't want to potentially infect someone else, but it's how do you have those conversations in a meaningful way when you personally know that you're competing with the content that's out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so for me, I don't, you know, dismiss a lot of their information or misinformation they're getting. I just try to elaborate on it a little bit more, just to give them another frame of thought. Because the last thing I would want to do is, you know, dismiss any notion of what information is being put out there. I just like to, you know, lay other things across the table so that way it's not just one entity that you're reviewing. So that way you'll have a multiple of things that you can refer to As far as practitioners and non-practitioners getting to the youth, the same way they're finding this information, go to social media and start debunking a lot of this misinformation. So that way the youth can see, hey, there's information being put out here, but here's a doctor or here's somebody who works there who's seen this on the front line. Start putting this stuff out there, because if we want the youth to hear us, we have to come to a level where they communicate. And where they communicate right now is through social media.
Right.
Can I add
That's
to that?
fantastic. Anything else you want to kind of share with that, Gail?
Yes, I wanted to add to that too. So I'm using a similar approach, but my approach is a little different too when it comes to the misinformation and, those theories that's out there. Some have been quite alarming to me. I know that one was just the whole, Black folks can't get it. And that was something that many believed and just based their behavior on the belief that we were, I guess, immune to COVID-19. And so I give genuine reactions to my participants. I show that concern of, I want you to be safe. I want you to be okay. And I'm just concerned because here are the facts. So I am giving a little education too about here are the facts, and then trying to teach them how to do it like a digital detox.
A digital detox.
A digital detox.
I need one of those.
Okay, right. And let me tell you, honestly, this age group to this population, they're not going to debate about the need for that, right? They know that it's consuming. They know that sometimes it increases those symptoms. They become more anxious. They feel it afterwards. How did you feel when you detox for 2 days? They can state a difference in symptomology. They weren't comparing themselves to anyone. They weren't comparing themselves to, their past. I mean, it's just, it has this total effect. So digital detoxing right now, I'm kind of using that as an intervention. And then just showing a real concern, like I am just really concerned about that, So, and then they get it because they know we care.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. And so we got a question. And I guess both of you will probably be best ways to answer it. So the question is, what aspects of youth culture behavior are doing more harm than good, but society calls it normal or okay?
Is this relating to the current state of affairs, or is it just in general?
I'm going to assume that it's related to the current state of affairs. So I'm going to repeat the question. What aspects of youth culture or behavior are doing more harm than good, but society calls it normal or okay?
That's an interesting question.
It is a good question.
One of the things I can recognize is how the youth have this mistrust for a lot of, I want to say, government entities or whatnot. When it comes to this issue, the conspiracy things are out there rampant. But I feel like one of the things that we normalize with youth, when as far as this is coming to this particular instance, is really our feeling that, since this has been dubbed as a disease that's getting older people, I feel like the youth are being normalized as people that can't get affected because of their age. And I feel like it's being normalized that, hey, it's affecting a certain group of people. Some youth are okay, but then we're seeing stories and we're hearing things that, no, it's affecting everybody. It's not no age discrimination when it comes to this COVID-19. So I just feel like the youth are normalizing this theory in their head that it's affecting older people and not just them. So it's causing them to react carelessly and still carry on doing things and carrying on the social aspects of their life that could potentially be hazardous to them.
Very good answer. Is there another question? Okay. So we're at 11:57.
Okay.
So we're like at the tail end of today's podcast. And so normally what we do for our Woke Moments podcast is that we leave the audience with something to think about, whether It's a positive reflection or just a general reflection. And so what would you like to share with our audience about your woke moment? What do you want to leave with your woke moment? And we normally say, my woke moment is.
Okay. All right. I love it. I love it. So this is going to be, it's an integration of the season right now, this COVID-19 pandemic, and just what I've learned just in my living, right? So my woke moment is knowing that uncertainty is only disguised as affliction, but its true nature is to remind me that I cannot be successful alone. I need a healthy community of loving people to support and refine me. That's my woke moment.
That's fantastic. And you, Jeremy?
I would say my woke moment is negativity is not real. Positive energy is the only energy. Every negative aspect you can think of you, there is a very large hint of positivity in there. Perfect example before we go, I recommend everybody watch the Jordan documentary. He said a very key thing about why he was so competitive that just raised my antennas. He said that he was so competitive was because his relationship with his brother and his father. He said that it traumatized him that his father would always choose his older brother, Larry, over him, and he felt like he wasn't getting that same love. So he turned that traumatic experience into a competitive nature that has allowed him to be one of the most successful people in the history of this planet. So I just want to leave that to say, do not allow mental illness or trauma to directly take away your positive energy because it's always there.
Excuse me. Thank you so much. I mean, that's been absolutely fantastic. I want to thank our listening and viewing audience for joining us today on this very important topic, COVID-19 and our youth and young adults. I do want to express to the audience, please like all of Sanctuary of Hope social media pages on Instagram and Facebook. We're at Sanctuary of Hope LA. On Twitter, we're at _SOH_LA. And we're doing some amazing things with helping young people to build and tap into their resiliency during this COVID period. And also want to invite you to visit our website as well, which is www.thesoh.org. I want to thank you for joining us again, and we are tuning out. Feel free to connect with us at any time. And thank you, Gail, and thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Woke Moment. For more information about our organization, please visit SOH.org. Subscribe to us for a Woke Moment wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at @SOH_LA and on Facebook and Instagram at Sanctuary of Hope LA.